Welcome to the podcast where together, every Monday, we explore hospitality in its very broadest sense. From culture and cooking, cocktails and coffee, nutrition and farming, politics and animal welfare, organic and sustainability, family and business, entrepreneurship, and much, much more. Come and learn with me, Mark Cribb, about where our food and our drink comes from, and the businesses and, more importantly, the human beings that thrive on where we decide to spend our time and our money. Sign up to our weekly newsletter at humansofhospitality.co.uk and hit subscribe on your podcast player of choice. Welcome to this week's show, the week when rumours have been hotting up on the reopening of the hospitality sector. From will it be April to will it be May to maybe al fresco goes first to perhaps the pubs can open without actually selling any beer and all sorts of other often irritating rumours. What, however, is impressive is that 11 million people have been vaccinated in the UK and we seem to be storming ahead of the rest of Europe. The impact on the drop in the over 80s being hospitalised is exciting to see, so perhaps finally we are on the homeward straight to reopening the doors and some sort of normality. Certainly what I've worked out in my business is that there is no point second guessing and we are simply focused on getting ready for what is likely to be an exceptionally busy summer down in my neck of the woods on the south coast of the UK, once we are given the green light. Right, this week I have an awesome guest for you, someone who really has been there and got the t-shirt in their hospitality adventure. Lee Cash is the founder of Peach Pubs, a collection of 19 proper pubs full of character spread across a number of market towns in the heart of England. I really enjoyed chatting to Lee and hearing about his hospitality journey. Lee's always been driven to become self-employed in the sector. He learnt his craft with some of the best, from Robin Sheppard at Bespoke Hotels and chef Raymond Blanc, but all the time driven and motivated to test himself, to learn all he could and get ready to put into practice the art of perfecting 1,000 little details to make his own venues successful. I always love chatting to people who really have proper hospitality in their soul, who understand how spaces feel, how the lighting, the candles, the music, the team, the furniture, the layout, the space itself, and so much more comes together to create somewhere special that people really enjoy spending time. After a pandemic year more than ever, I miss the awe in seeing people and places that have nailed this beautiful choreography. I loved Lee's perspectives about pubs being a great leveller. More so perhaps than restaurants, you are likely to have every type and age of person hanging out at a bar, ordering a decent pint of beer. You'll get to hear about how Lee and his business partner Hamish brought such different skills to the business, and how over the years, at different stages in their growth, these different perspectives have helped Peach grow into such a fantastic business. You'll also laugh at the story of Lee somehow being so skint one morning that he had to use his passport as a deposit in an Aussie Backpackers, to a few hours later saying yes to his first chef job cooking alone on a boat full of divers on the Great Barrier Reef. That say yes now, work out how later kind of attitude that so many driven entrepreneurs have. I really hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. If you do, can you please do me a favour? Certainly Apple Podcasts make this easy, and I think plenty of other platforms will let you review the show. If you could pick up the device you're listening on, find the review section and hit 5 stars, and even better, say a few words, that would really help me out. I would love your help to get this podcast in front of more people. On Apple, we're currently sat on 108 reviews, and with 100,000 downloads, that's not really a huge number. So let's see if between us we can get that to 200. Leave a few words and I'll read them out on next week's show and be very grateful for your help. Basically, the more reviews, particularly recent ones, that I get, the easier it is for me to convince great guests to say yes about coming on the show and having a chat. So it is a win-win for both of us. Okay, thanks again for listening. Let's get over and meet Lee. Cheers. Lee Cash, good morning. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. You are one of the founders of Peach Pubs, and I'm really excited to have a chat with you today. Alas, we are not face-to-face due to the current COVID rules. Where in the world are you joining me from, Lee?
Well, I wish we were face-to-face. I'm really craving getting together with people in person, but I'm down in South Devon, a village called Thurleston, which is a great place in the world to be if you have to live through a lockdown.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you near the beach down in Devon, or are you in the countryside?
No, I can see the ocean from the front of the house and walk down to the beach.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been a real saviour in this
Yeah,
for
that really
sure.
is a saviour.
Mm.
Yeah. No, likewise, I can't unfortunately see the sea from my office. I am in Bournemouth, so just a sort of a little wave along the coast to you. But I'm very lucky that after this, I'll be taking my dog and convince my son to come off the computer for a few minutes from homeschooling and take a walk by the ocean, which really, really helps. So for people who don't know Peach, can you just give me some context to the business? How many venues, where they are generally geographically, how many people you employ, perhaps turnover? Can you paint a bit of a picture of Peach for me, please?
Sure. Well, we're 20 years old this year, 2 decades of running our lovely pubs. We got into the gastropub thing sort of quite sort of early on in that sort of lovely pub revolution that seems to have taken over the country. But there's that idea of amping up the food into really great quality. I was running brasseries at the time, working alongside Raymond Blanc in Le Petit Blanc brasseries, and I just really thought that taking everything that I'd learned from the years of working with him in terms of food and service, and I did used to talk about Peach Pubs when we started. I used to talk to the team about creating little brasseries in these pubs, and that was really sort of one of the sort of founding principles of that sort of, better food, a great pint or a glass of wine served by somebody who cares that you're having a great day. And the Rose and Crown in Warwick was the first pub, and I'd met my business partner Hamish Stoddart in that year, and we looked at tons and tons of pubs, and I decided on that one. And I was living upstairs, running it from dawn till late at night, loving every minute of that. And we quickly turned it into, a place that was heaving, full every day. We hit on something. We hit on a formula that seemed to get people flooding through the doors. And then Hamish he'd already built and sold the business before and was used to operating with more people on multi-sites, and really helped me start talking early on about sort of bottling the magic and how you sort of grow a team, how you communicate a set of values across a growing number of people, all of which I was highly resistant to at the beginning, because I was like, I don't need any of that, energy and shared ownership, which I'm sure we'll come on to. High energy and shared ownership will rule the way, and that's all we're going to need. But he sort of cajoled me into sort of starting to write down some of the things that we were doing. And actually, it was the team who started creating this language around peachy, not peachy. They started saying, "Oh, Lee wouldn't like that. That's not peachy," and we. So I can't say that I called it Peach Pubs, any sort of genius behind the sort of building a people brand thing. But we just the language started self-inventing, and we jumped on that, and we quickly managed to. In fact, within 18 months, we had 3 pubs, and we now have 19. We've sold 2 along the way. One that wasn't an error, we got the location wrong, and one that started out being it was a great pub for us for years, but the town just got overtaken with tons and tons of competition, and we found ourselves not in the best spot anymore, and we sold that one a few years ago. So we've done 21 new openings in 20 years. We've got 19 now, 19 slightly forlorn shut pubs, apart from a little bit of takeaway, but I don't want to dwell on that today at all. I'm sure everyone's sick.
Yeah, well, we'll touch on it, actually. In fact, you just answered about 19 of my questions in one hit, Lee. So that was pretty impressive intro, to be fair. But there's a few topics that you mentioned there that I'm going to come back to. How many people do you employ? Well, normally.
We're sort of around 500. About 500 people now.
Okay.
Wow, blows my mind.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? And turnover?
20.
Not of people, but cash.
Yeah, hopefully as low as possible in people.
Yeah.
Cash about 28 million.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, quite the sizable business. You were very much the driving force behind that back in 2002, and I do want to sort of touch on a little bit of your journey. You mentioned your time with Raymond Blanc there, and we'll touch on Robin Sheppard as well, as somebody else I know you worked with. But your role in the early days, very much founder. You mentioned you lived above the pub, so driving force. What's your primary role in the business today?
Well, about 3 years ago, I took a big decision to make a life change. The coast was calling. I think I've learned that I'm not the right guy for this sort of stage of a business. So those sort of startup years, my personal skill set was brilliant. Hamish is the managing director now, and is much better suited to running the company in this stage. So I'm a non-exec director now, and I live in South Devon, which is 3 hours away from the nearest pub. So I'm still involved sort of strategically with the company, which I still love very, very much, and still very, very proud of more, as proud as ever of what it's achieving, but I have a very different role myself.
Yeah. Did it work from that work-life balance sort of change you were looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I've got two young kids, and I've been very, very fortunate. The amount of time that I've spent with them, over the past couple of years, an opportunity that a lot of new dads and new mums, don't get these days. But it is really quite bizarre and strange, dealing with your own emotions around something that you've been so close to and so formative in, to change that role. And I have tried and I am trying to be, really, really good at that and add value in a different way. But I can't say it's been emotionally easy. It's been emotionally very, 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 very tough, but it's afforded me a lot of headspace to think, and I'm sort of getting close to a couple of other projects, for a very long time, I thought I was going to be man and boy Peach Pubs, and that was the thing I was going to do for my life. And it sort of didn't, by my own sort of hand, that didn't end up that way. Some days that feels like the best decision I ever made, and there have been days where it's felt like the worst. So, but overall, I believe that it's the right thing for Peach and the team there. And as I say, I'm sort of I'm really learning to enjoy the role I have now.
Yeah, interesting. It's amazing how many people I speak to who I think most people say I'm in the industry as well, and God, the dream sometimes of thinking, oh my God, it's such a intensive industry. I think 10 years in this industry is maybe 30 years in some others, partly just because we're open 7 days a week, pretty much 24 hours a day, particularly if you throw in a hotel element. So I think there's plenty of us that dream about finding that utopia of doing something else and having a bit of time. But then it's amazing how many people I speak to who were almost broken at one point and think, I've got out, but end up back in it and just really, really miss it. So do you think it's likely? You mentioned a couple of other projects, but potentially in hospitality again, or are you not allowed to do that?
No, I am. I mean, obviously I would never do anything that competed with the peach pubs, but we're sort of in different parts of the country now. I don't know. I can't say that I won't end up involved in another restaurant for the rest of my life. I have taken on. I'm in the process of taking on a non-exec role with small pub company called the Cat and Wickets in Nottinghamshire, which is a guy, a cricketer who is coming out of cricket and has got a pub. And actually, it's Harry Gurney, and his business partner is actually Stuart Broad, obviously also quite a well-known cricketer.
Amazing.
So I'm doing that sort of coaching role for somebody who's in the startup phase, which is really enjoyable, really taking me back to my roots. One pub, how you go from one pub to two pubs. So I am already involved in another.
There you go. See, you'll be hooked back in no time. But exciting. I can imagine it must be really interesting to go back to those days, which is some of what we're going to talk about today. So let's get back to the Peachy story you mentioned then, and I do love it. I remember looking at your pubs a few years ago, actually, long before I was launching a podcast, and just thinking that they looked great. I love some of the wording, some of the terminology. Great enthusiasm for looking after your team and all sorts of stuff. And one of the key little things of that is just that, is it peachy? Does it feel peachy? What's a peachy pub? What's a peachy team member? It does work really well. And you said it came through by accident. But what does it mean? What does it mean to you, this being peachy? What is that?
Well, it was, I think I'm quite an intuitive restaurateur. I've always been a bit of a party host, whether that's a stand-up sort of dancing and drinking party or a sit-down dinner party. I grew up cooking, and so it's sort of it's one of the things. So when I sort of either working for other people or working for myself, I feel I can see a room and pick up on a lot of body language of genuinely understand whether people are having a good time. And so, as a sort of general manager of a place, I can buzz around and I can understand whether table by table people are enjoying the experience and tailor that experience to make it work for them. And I had a huge amount of enthusiasm for the experience that people were having, the food that we were putting on the plate, the drink that we're putting in the glass, but also the lighting, the music, whether watering pots of flowers, making sure the candles are alight, all the little the nuances, and restaurants are 1,000 little things done right, and none of them is vastly complex, but it's very difficult to get enough of them right enough of the time that builds that experience that then means enough people have a great experience that drives them to want to return and bring their friends. And hence the reason that our industry is littered with super launches that fizzle in a short amount of time, and to be able to go walk into the Rose and Crown now 20 years later, and that pub is still, the sort of kingpin pub in Warwick, and it sits right bang on the market square, and it is loved by a great deal of the community that it serves, and people feel hugely passionate about it. And the photos that I get through at the minute from my friends, people I met, when we started that pub, standing outside the front taking selfies, going, open the door again, please, we want to come back, is so heartwarming, and proves that sort of culture that we started then has really is part of our company, about the way we treat people over a long term, and that pub's been there for a couple of 100 years or whatever however long it's been, centuries, and we've been the sort of custodians of it for 20. And it's doing all those great things that a public house should do. And that's
That's
what,
amazing, and you don't get that with restaurants, do you? That sort of, like you say, that custodianship of a piece of history, I suppose. Because particularly in the casual dining sector, I suppose new restaurants, the churn rate in restaurants is huge. But it must be really satisfying to take a piece of sort of British history and give it another new lease of life for the next generation, and see that continued in your sort of custodianship, I guess.
yeah. And the great thing that we've always, the thing I particularly love about the pub versus the restaurant is that is I don't think in any other environment you just get this. It's a great leveler. You just get this huge mix of people from a town, and they all stand next to each other at the bar and sit next to each other in the eatery, and it's just a great leveler. And it really, I think, not being able to go to them has really sort of highlighted what so many people use these sort of strap lines about serving the community and it being a hub, and I'm not sure we really often think about what that means until it's taken away from us. And I certainly know what it means because I know how much I'm missing it personally.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
can't
no,
wait.
100%. Yeah, you mentioned then, and I agree, completely. That sort of 1,000 details, and it is it's a bit of a curse actually. I think walking into a room in some ways and noticing the music, the lighting, is the music the right level to to get chat, and actually once the chat's going and turn the music down a bit or up a bit, you can control the vibe in the room. There's so many little things you can tweak, and it's a curse because then even if you're off duty, you walk into venues. And I'm so irritated that I walk into hotel restaurants often were the way where you just think, oh my god, it'd be so simple. There's not even any background music on. You can hear the clinking of
Yeah.
cutlery. It's such an awkward atmosphere. But to take all of that, very easy when it's in your sort of in your blood and you feel it as an owner operator. When you were living above the pub, you can really control that. You could probably work out from sitting in the lounge whether the music was the right volume or not. But to try and bottle that, if I go into any one of your 19 venues, will it instantaneously feel like a peach pub to me, or are they all so different that you wouldn't necessarily know? And how do you bottle up those nuances and replicate that as a business gets bigger?
Well, if we do what we say on the tin, then I hope you would recognise it as a peach pub. Then they don't all look the same. We design them around the different buildings. We try and make our design sit in each of the pubs, individually. Whether it's got a beautiful pub on the river in Maidenhead. You've got other pubs on the a completely different era on the village green and whatever. So it's not a one size fits all, and we try and be sympathetic to the buildings. The menus are similar, but certainly not 100% the same. But what is absolutely the same across is that we live our values, and we are true to that original vision, and we've always been heavy on training and talking about all these sort of invisible touches that make the difference. So and we get a lot of feedback, a lot of the time about the quality of the food and the service, and one of our values is serving the good stuff, which we should talk about as well. Sort of commitment to the quality of the ingredients that you're putting on the plate, and I think that does come through, and in all the different locations that we're at.
Mm. How do you choose those locations that are mattering? Because in the early days, that was very much your role. I think was traveling around finding those. What makes a good location for a peach pub?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was brilliant. I mean, when we started doing it, it was ordnance survey maps, sellotaped together with a highlighter pen, and then I'd highlight the PHs, the public houses, drive, see them, number them, make notes, and then you were talking to the agents, and you knew which ones in an area you'd love to have, and then 1 or 2 or 3 years might go by, and it pop up because of circumstance, and we've been great at turning around sort of big pubco failures where they're just not personal enough to make a pub work in a town. And And we've sort of become reasonably well known for that. And they do come and talk to us and say, "Do you think you could make something of this one?" Which is some of the ways that some of our great pubs have come to us. It's a real networking game. So it was a lot of networking by me and Hamish, a lot of driving around, a lot of sitting outside places on stormy nights in January and February, and just and using your sort of emotional intelligence to work out where those little corners were and the sunny side of the street, and the sort of balance of the size of the pub, the style of the building, the outside space. Does it have a car park? If not, where are people going to park? And all the bits of the infrastructure that you need to make it work. Of course, now it's done a lot more with Google Map and demographic reports, and as the gastropub market has developed, of course, me and our competitors know where all the good stuff is. So it's harder. It's harder than it used to be, but it's still possible.
Yeah, that's a bit of luck. How much of that then? Because it sounds brilliant. I love the idea. Yeah, like you say, sat outside in the rain and counting the number of people walking past. How much of that in those early days was intuition, and how much of it was a spreadsheet where you tick off, okay, this is the criteria we're looking at. Would you even look at population size of the village and stuff like that, or did you just go there a bit like the restaurant and go, this feels like a peach pub? I can see it.
Well, it's funny that you should say spreadsheet, because our whole history has been littered with Hamish, who loves a spreadsheet. He manages everything with spreadsheets, and I was intuition only.
Therein lies the key to a good team, isn't it?
Yeah. So he'd be saying, "You've got to fill in the spreadsheet." I'd be saying, "I don't want to fill in the spreadsheet. I just want to go and see it and tell you what I think." And somewhere in the middle was the right answer.
I love it. Yeah. I have those meetings. I drive my finance director absolutely bonkers if he listens to this. He'll be chuckling because he has to write everything down in a very organised and structured fashion, and I have to stand up and wave my arms around a lot and draw a picture. So it takes all sorts, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which is good. So, but it's clearly pretty effective, because you said you've only sold one. So does that mean you only got one wrong? Or you sold two, I think, actually, but one wasn't really your fault because it just changed. But yeah, you sold two, but only one of them was because it was actually a mistake to buy it in the first place. Is that what you said?
Yeah, we got a little bit carried away with ourselves, and we did a pub in a new build site in Kenilworth called the Almanac, which was the first time we sort of converted an urban box into a pub, and that worked really well for us. And then we thought, right, we're off now. Not only are we going to do these nice old character buildings, but we can convert urban boxes into new build boxes into and create pubs. And we went and did one in a shopping centre in Leicester, and we learned pretty fast that shopping centres don't want gastropubs.
I'm struggling to imagine how that was your intuition. Was that Hamish's spreadsheet that did that one?
No, I found that one.
Really?
Take full credit for that one. We learned that wasn't our natural environment. So, but we lived, we learned, we lost some money, and we moved on.
Yeah, well, good to do it and get it done early. But that is the thing. I don't have any pubs, but often think about it. And certainly in the last couple of days, sort of reading about your journey and reminding myself of Peach, I was like, yeah, I could see doing a pub. There's something really special and different about them. I think that you couldn't replicate in a shopping centre. I want to touch quickly on your background before we come back into Peach, because it was interesting. I think I was reading about the fact that you were fundamentally sort of brought up on decent food, and credited your mum with that, because it was you and three siblings, largely brought up by your mum alone, but she seemed to be I think worded as a bit of hippie and into food. Is that fair, that the sort of interest in food came from her?
Yeah, definitely. I was the eldest. I've got three younger sisters. There was and just my mum, and she was a great home cook. We didn't have a bunch of cash. Sort of cooked from scratch, and I sort of grew up helping with lots of stuff around the house, including food. So me and her used to cook together. So I just had that sort of that education from a young age at home, and I just enjoyed it. And I started working in a local pub very young as well, and the sort of two things clicked together. And then I went straight from school to college to do my BTEC national diploma in Torquay, and then up to Bournemouth, actually, where you are.
My neck of the woods. Yeah, how was that?
I had a great time. Early 90s, fantastic music scene. I always think that was a great moment in club culture. Great dance music of the early 90s in and around Bournemouth, and being sort of just near enough London, isn't it? You get a lot of stuff sort of coming down the M23 or whatever, coming down that way. And it was a great time in club culture.
Yeah,
so I had
the academy. What year were you born, Lee?
74.
Okay, I'm 75. I was just thinking, I think we might have crossed. I was at Bournemouth College, funny enough, and so we may have crossed paths very closely in a past life. So that job you said you got, I think it was Worcester's, wasn't it? The first sort of pub job. What was it? Because you said that was probably the reason you went into hospitality, is just loving the industry. What was it about working in that pub that sort of made hospitality your destiny, I suppose?
Well, it was a person, and I've been lucky to have a great number of sort of fantastic sort of coaches and mentors in my life. And the first one there was a guy called Paul, and I just sort of idolized him. I thought he was really cool. I remember he had a white Lotus, and he was that. He was that sort of host. He knew everyone in town. He was funny. He was a great character in the place. I think he probably had a lot of qualities that we haven't repeated in Peach. He's a bit of a bad lad as well, I think. But as a sort of 13-year-old, I just thought he was, I just thought he was great, and I just loved being there much more than I loved being at school. And so I was peeling veg and washing dishes, and I wasn't old enough to work on the bar. But then I was stocking up at the end of services, and and I was allowed out to come and join the grown-ups and have a bottle of Becks. And
they were the days, weren't they? We used to do that as a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
I don't think we get away with that anymore, would we? There's a sign of how the industry's changed.
And it did. It just sort of clicked for me. And I guess I was very lucky. And if at 13 what you want to do, you can get out and get concentrating on it, and you can get going. And I was 27 when we opened the Rose and Crown. So I suppose
that was really fast work, actually. Yeah. And along that journey, I love the story of you in Australia. So I think you managed to, I'm going to use the word blag, I hope you don't mind, but blag your way onto a boat as a chef. Can you just tell that story? Because I think it's sort of indicative, I suppose, of that entrepreneurial, just say yes and then work it out later.
Yeah. Well, I got to Cairns in northern Queensland with $10 left. I had to give my passport to the youth hostel to let me stay because I didn't have any money, and it was sort of quite usual then that they would take your passport off you so that you couldn't go anywhere. And I was walking up and down the seafront, going in and out of all the hotels and bars, saying, look, I'll do anything. Has anyone got a job? Wasn't having a great deal of luck, and I went. I was talking to, I think I was just talking to somebody on the street, and they said that they said one of the boats had lost a ship's cook on short notice. When I say ship, dive boats with 20 people on, had lost someone at short notice, and I should go down. And they sort of pointed me in the right direction, and I walked in the shop and said, "Hey, you're looking for a cook?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, I can do that." And they said, "Can you do food and drink, breakfast and lunch and dinner for 20 people on a 3-day trip?" And I just said, "Yeah, sure I can." And they said, "Great." And it was about probably midday, and the boat's due to go out at 4 p.m. So I think the fact that they were so desperate, they were like, they couldn't believe someone had just walked in and who said they could do it. And I went straight down to the library, photocopied a few recipes. I had a couple in my head from cooking with mum, but mum's sort of home style slow cook one pot cooking wasn't really sort of dive boat stuff, but with the few recipes that I'd photocopied, and I just sort of jotted down a list of ingredients and tried to work out roughly how much people would get through in 4 days. I basically overbought a lot so that I didn't run out. I went down to the quayside and we went off to the supermarket, got 5 or 6 trolley fulls of food, and off I went for 4 days out onto the Barrier Reef, which is I'd already got my scuba diving ticket because it's something I was interested in. It was a dream job. But God, I was ill. And I just thought, I was like, "Lee, this is the best job you're ever going to have." But God, I was seasick, and I kept my toothbrush and my toothpaste in my pocket so that I could go and be sick, brush my teeth, splash cold water on myself and carry on. And I was like, "I am not losing this job because this is unbelievable." And it was. And strangely, actually, the guy I worked for, who's called John the Yank, John Hoovel, a reef encounter, who still lives there. I had a Zoom call with him only a few weeks ago. Was that 25 years ago? I was working.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. Again, I wonder if we were on the same boat. This is a bit weird. I remember I did a dive course on the Barrier Reef, but the food was pretty good. What was the feedback on your food? Did you pull it off?
Yeah, just about.
There was, yeah. No, well, it must have been all right because they kept you employed for another 6 months, did they?
Yeah. I did 6 months there.
Amazing.
And then I came back, and noticed that. I remember being on the phone to my dad, and I was right, "I'm coming back now because I've got to get on because I want to get my own restaurant." And he was like, "Guys, sounds amazing. I've worked too many years. Nose to the grindstone. If you're having a great time, just stay there." And I remember going, "No, I'm not. I've done a year here. I'm coming home because I want to get my own place."
Amazing. You were driven from a young age then. Well, yeah, clearly to have started the business at 27. You ended up working for Robin Sheppard, who made the introduction to you and I from Bespoke Hotels. You were there for a while. What was it like working for Robin, and what did you learn from him?
He's an amazing, general manager of a hotel, a real statesman. He could just talk to anybody. He always would be able to find the thing that they were interested in and have enough knowledge to sort of draw them into a conversation and make them feel like they'd known him forever. So, the thing about Robin is he knows enough of the cricket, enough of the rugby, enough of the football, enough of what's going on at Chelsea Flower Show, enough of what's going on in the new restaurant opening, enough of what's going on in the news to wrap all his guests into conversation and sort of and be interesting to a really wide variety of people. And he's just, you've spoken to him. He's just a joy to be around. And he sort of took me under, he sort of took it upon himself to coach me quite a lot. And actually, it was him I went and spoke to after year at the Bespoke Hotel, and said, "Look, I've been to London. Quaglino's. I'd been and had lunch at Quaglino's. I think Mezzo had just opened. Terence Conran was at the height of his powers, and I said, Robin, I'm not sure that hotels are going to be where I'm at. I think this brasserie thing is going to be more me." And he said, "Well, Raymond Blanc has just opened Le Petit Blanc in Morton Street in Oxford, which is a Conran designed restaurant. And I know the general manager. Would you like to do go and go and work with him for a short period of time and see how you get on?" And he fixed that up for me, which was incredibly generous of him, and kicked off the next stage of my career.
No, that's really nice, isn't it? I think it happens a lot. I think if you work in hospitality, fundamentally you just really like other human beings, and that sort of shared adventure and making sure that people fulfill their potential and encouraging that is part of it. What did you learn from working with Raymond Blanc that was different from what you learned working with Robin?
Raymond always was and is probably the greatest natural cook I've ever met. If Raymond cooks for you, you've been cooked for. He's just incredible as a producer of delicious food. So we've got really into the ingredient, how important the quality is of what you're putting on the plate. He introduced me to Peter Allen, and Aubrey Allen have been our butchers right from the beginning, and his son Russ is a great friend of mine. So we started learning about grass-fed suckler herd and dry-aged beef, and I think even then we were buying our pork from Jimmy Butler in Suffolk, which is where Peach still gets all its free-range pork from now. And I could barely, Raymond he's very frenetic. He would come in howling at me about all the things I'd done wrong and why the restaurant wasn't set up right. And half of it I would understand and half of it I wouldn't, because he speaks with a very heavy French accent. In those days, he'd have, 2 cigarettes on the go. It'd be this sort of whirlwind of a man. Pretty difficult at times to work around, but I was determined not to, I wasn't going to be a quitter, and determined not to be sort of scared off by this crazy energy, and just learned a lot about food really in that time. That was the first Petit Blanc restaurant. And the volume we were doing. I mean, that was a 150 seat restaurant. Nearly, what are we talking now? 25 years ago, and I think we were taking about £40,000 a week then.
Wow.
So it was incredibly busy. That was what you learn, how to run a restaurant floor. And then my next great boss, a guy called Sunil Punjabi, joined as the general manager, and I was his deputy. And then that was a great education in running restaurant floors, watching tables, learning who your guests were, starting to understand marketing, and connecting to people and making them come back. So I did Oxford, then Cheltenham, and then ran and opened the restaurant in Birmingham. 1999.
Yeah. It's a pretty awesome sort of apprenticeship and mentorship, isn't it? To get those kind of humans to inspire you, which is why I guess you were so well placed to start your own business pretty young. What was the trigger that made you said you'd always known you wanted to sort of have your own place? Was there a particular trigger that went, right, now is the time to go from employed to self-employed?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, I just the trigger was I did a year in Birmingham, and you knew I was getting close to the point, but we had a really successful year. So then at the beginning of my second year, I said to myself, right, I'm going to run this for a second year. If I can prove that I can, do the things I need to do. So write and recruit my own team, recruit my own chefs for this restaurant, recruit and train my own front of house team, write and execute a marketing budget and make campaigns happen and make people come to events. And do I think that I can learn all the people in this, the people that I need to know and network properly in the town, in the city? And so I set myself a sort of set of 10 tests and beat the profitability that I'd achieved in the first year. In the second year, I was like, if I can tick off all of those things, then I think I'm ready. I also had this dream of this shared ownership idea, which we still operate today in Peach. And because everyone that I'd interviewed, whenever I was asking the question, what did they want to be doing in 5 years' time? No one ever said to me that they wanted to be MD of Hilton or anything like that. The majority said, I want my own place one day. And I thought, I'm going to take that and try and work out a way of sharing a piece of the action with the team that make it happen. And that will be how, over multiple pubs, you still get that owner-operated feel, and therefore trade, have a higher level of trade, a stronger level of trade than the market average. So that was a sort of founding principle, which we started with.
Just while you're on that, actually, because I'm interested. So yeah, sorry, because it will take us off on a slight tangent, but it feels like an appropriate time to ask. How do you do that? Because I agree with you 100%. If you're in that interview, some people you interview, that's what they want to do. When you then applied it to your business, were you looking for people who could sort of, put money on the table and buy in, or were you giving them the opportunity to earn the business? And when it was a sort of, JV, were you talking a percentage, or was this purely, sort of owner operator, but almost like the franchise model, I suppose, where you were sat beside them, or was it all of those? There's quite a lot of questions in that question, Lee, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah. Sort of and the answer is all of the above. Right. Some people put some cash on the table. When some people were working with us, and we got to the point we said, right, the next pub we find, we will do a deal with you. And it was quite ad hoc in the early days, very, very person by person. It wasn't really a sort of we hadn't created a format for it. It was a sort of negotiation with the individual. Sometimes people sacrificed bonuses and salary. Sometimes they wrote a little bit of a check. Whatever, that wasn't really what was important. What we were trying to do was tie them in and make, create this feeling of welcome to my place, so when guests walk through the front door, they could look them in the eye and say, welcome to my place, and mean it. And so we did it in a number of different ways with a number of different people. And, over time, we've cleaned that up into a sort of more understood process, part of the process, which is what we have now. And there are 20 partners in Peach now, mostly made up of people we've been working with for a long time who've come through the ranks, which is something that we're hugely proud of.
That's really good. And is that something? So if they come within the ranks, is that sort of almost like they earn a part of the business, I suppose, because it is nuanced, I guess. We've had various bonus schemes, and it might be a percentage of profit. So hopefully, still bought in because it's very much under your control and perhaps not capped. But there is something about ownership that makes people feel different. But it can be quite complex to achieve that through sort of shareholder agreements and various things. Yeah, for those people who've gone particularly that route, that sort of in-house route, how have you? What's the formula you found that works best?
Well, actually, it's I thought at the beginning that people would be like me, that they just want to own it, and actually, that's not the truth. A lot of people want to work in a business that is really well run, really stable, and with a mixture of people around them who have different skills. So the sort of the scheme, the program we run now is about shared ownership, but it's less about you own that pub over there and you own a bit of that pub over there, and more about collectively we own this thing. And we could certainly spend this podcast and another few podcasts just on this, but it's
that's great. Have you got time? No, I'm just kidding. We'll meet for a beer one day, Lee. And, I'll pick your brain. Yeah, I'm asking for a friend, Lee. I just want to know. But no, I've got a couple of circumstances in mind, but you're right. We'll do that separately. So back to the story then. Yeah, you sort of fulfilled that learning and ambition and goals, I guess, with Raymond and the various businesses. Yeah, what was the final thing that you went, right, here I go, and just tell me, how did that take place to get your first pub?
Well, I decided, so that my second year went well. I'd then decide. So then I'd set myself a challenge of using, I think it was a day a week to write my business plan. So I was, still working full time, but on a day off, I'd write my business plan. I was also I decided that sort of South Birmingham area was a really good area to get started. It wasn't overpopulated with gastropubs. I'd seen a few fantastic ones owned by some people who've become Paul Hales and Paul Salisbury, who've become great friends, who I worked with for a very short period of time. And I was learning that Birmingham commuter belt, I thought, was a good place to start. So I had my map, I had my business plan, and then actually my then boss, Sunil, who I was, good friends enough and honest enough with to say, look, this is where I think I'm going to go, introduced me to Hamish and his wife Jo, who they'd sold Hamish's family business, and Hamish was taking a bit of time out and was living in the south of France. And I phoned up and said, I hear you're looking for what to do next. And Hamish flew back and came and saw some locations. So I had a business partner, and then I was explaining the product, and Jo became involved in a wine tasting, because she has got a particular passion for quality of wine and great wine producers. So we were doing a wine tasting together, and so there's the pieces of the puzzle sort of started coming together, and then I decided, I just got to the point where it was like, okay, put the it's time to do it. So I handed in my notice, and I remember I went to catch the train down to Oxford to go and see Raymond personally, to give him my notice, and bought the newspaper and opened the paper, and there was an article by Sting, and I've still got it somewhere. I can't remember the date, but must have been November 2001 at some time, and opened the newspaper, and it said, "Take a risk and never look back." And it was about Sting's journey, because I think he was a primary school teacher or something like that.
That's right.
And I was like, it's an omen.
Yeah.
And I went to see Raymond and handed him my notice, and he wished me well. Thankfully, tried to get me to stay. But
always good for the ego.
Yeah. Wish me well, and I was off, and that sort of band of
that was the start.
Band of three, yeah. So it's me as the operator. Hamish sort of started out as very sort of, he was doing a number of things at the time. So it was a couple of years later, or really a year later, when we found another pub, and things were starting to go quite quickly for us. And then Jo started working alongside us as well on the I think she started on that if you can't beat them, join them theory. But we sort of formed into three musketeers pretty quickly, and Joe started getting involved with the interior and the sort of look and feel of the pubs, as well as working with me on product, starting with wine, but quickly progressing into menu. And I think something we've always been good at is having a mix of sort of the male and the female opinion on everything, the way it looks, the music that's on the playlist, the food that's on the menu. And so the three of us were sort of working closely together from early on.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. So those first couple of pubs, then the One Elm and the Rose and Crown, what did you do to them? Because they were, was it a case of really good timing as well as good skill? Because you took those, and what was the transformation process that they went through, and what was the result of that?
Actually, we went from 1 to 3 in one big jump, partially because we were brave, and I'd the second stroke third pub was the Fleece at Witney, which had been refurbished, developed by someone else, but they hadn't made a very good job of operating it, and it wasn't going very well. And I built a relationship with Green King, and been down, and we're almost to the point of signing on the dotted line when the One Elm came up, which was a freehold, but it had gone bust, but we had this opportunity to buy a freehold. And so I went back to Green King and said, look, I'm really sorry. I think the Fleece is a really great pub, but this freehold has come up and it's closer. And anyway, long story short, they really needed an operator, and they said, no, no, you're not backing out. And they offered us a cracking deal to not back out. So we looked at each other in their eyes and said, do we think we can do both? And then, so you learn pretty fast about multi-site operation when you go from 1 to 3, sort of in one big jump. So suddenly you're running, it probably wasn't 100 people, with part-timers and whatever, 25 people a pub. Suddenly you've got a team of 75, 3 different locations with 3 different buildings, slightly different offers, and all the sort of complexity that brings. That was a trial by fire.
Yeah, I bet it was. Yeah, at least there were 3 of you, I suppose. You could have had one each, but not
well, and two
kids. You don't want to be outnumbered.
2 of my sisters in the business by that stage, and
yeah. So it's interesting, isn't it, the big pub thing? And I suppose this is your secret, I guess. So what can you do? What do you do, or what did you do to a pub that big companies can't do? Because that was really the secret to your success, I guess.
Now, well, it was then as it is now, is make it more personal. And I think the casual dining whole market has been a victim of it has been there's lots of success out there, but there's also a degree of failure of people thinking that they can build a model and roll it out very, very fast and not lose the magic. And some industries you can do phenomenal growth, but growing the number of locations in hospitality fast is really, really hard. And you can, I don't know what exactly is the right pace. We certainly are looking for, we're looking forward optimistically to the next stage and think that we can do 2 or 3 over the coming year or so. But trying to do 10 a year is very hard. So I think getting the pace right, that you can build a team of people that understand each other and believe in the same values and have actually worked alongside each other to develop that muscle memory of how that is required to make a really good team, so that everything is covered. And as you said right at the beginning, we're open 7 days a week. A lot of our places do breakfast as well, so we're running from 6:30 in the morning until 11 o'clock at night, 7 days a week, and no one individual can be there in the amount of time that you are open. So you need several people, and it takes time to grow the quantum of people that all have the same goals and enough similarity in their way of operating that gets that continuity. And we've done some things sort of now to really sort of turbo that. So we've got a chef you may or may not know called Clive Dixon joined us a couple of years ago and works with our chef team. So he was Heston Blumenthal's right-hand man for a long time, as well as having had his own pub in the past, and I think he's held a Michelin star. So he's working with Trevor and Sam, who've worked with us for a really, really long time on developing great menus, great recipes, really, really replicable stuff that we can teach our chefs. And we're still one of the things that I think we do differently is we're still growing kitchens full of great cooks, great chefs. We're not trying to totally de-skill our kitchens. Which is part of why you still get this sort of passion from the team. So I'm not saying we make everything on site, because some things are not made better, but we're still cooking fresh food all the time, every day, and teaching people how to cook.
Yeah, that's interesting, that, isn't it? Because one of the temptations has become, I mean, again, you alluded to this, it's become much harder since you started in 2002 to get this right, and I'm sure there's lots of reasons for that. But if you look at the backdrop, I suppose, to the casual dining sector over the last few years, it has had higher staff costs, pension costs, living wage, food inflation, rates, taxes. The margins have just become more and more squeezed, and often the compromise that's made is, let's simplify the kitchen, let's have less people, let's buy stuff in, let's have cheaper ingredients, and people start to compromise, and that often feels that's when you get that slippery slope. And it's such a common trajectory of those sort of casual brands that have ended up having to take that approach. You can't pass the cost on to the customer. You can't afford to operate any lower margin, so you end up cutting corners. How have you navigated that? Because it's been impressive that you've continued to do so.
Yeah, well, let's be blunt. We have been taxed to death over 20 years. It's brutal, the onslaught of tax in our sector, and unfair. Rates, the rateable values of our buildings. VAT has gone from 15 to 17.5 to 20%. Minimum wage has been pushed rightly ahead of inflation, but the whole country was used to a price point that was basically funded by people being underpaid, which they are now not. Our industry is much more fairly rewarded, but of course that has an impact on price. So together with the cost of the team and the onslaught of tax, it's been really, really difficult. And you've had, only the most sophisticated have made a great job of it. And then overlaying on top of that we're now trying to be part of the movement towards a more sustainable future. And I don't believe that we believe it's the right thing to do, and we believe that we should all be taking part in it. Not just taking part, but actually making real change. But we're not supported to do that by the government. So, we run, these lovely old historic buildings. Why are we not being incentivized to insulate them, 3 times better than they are, so that we use less energy? We've just taken a decision to move our electricity to, green supply, wind power electricity, and that's costing us about £10,000 a year. And so, we look around the table and we say, are we prepared to spend that extra money because it's the right thing to do? Yes, we are, but we don't get any, we certainly don't get any credit for doing that. Buying free range chickens, as you will well know, is twice the price of buying non-free range chickens, but it's a value that we won't step back on. So, all these extra layers of sort of self-imposed cost to try and move in the right direction is an incredibly difficult puzzle to try and piece together and still be profitable, still make enough money to repay your interest rates on your borrowings and repay the loan to the bank and look after all the different stakeholders, be successful and make a profit at the bottom. Not easy, not getting any easier, and hopefully not just me, but lots of people on your podcast will keep banging on this drum and say, look after, the government needs to get involved in helping us change for the better, all of us.
Yeah, no, I agree with lots of things you said there, and it is complex. We all want to pay our teams more. We all want to see them well employed. I think a certain significant proportion of us want to help with the planet and all that entails. But yeah, it's so hard. It's like business, isn't it? If you're not making a profit, you can't do all of the things that you want to do. It's really challenging.
You don't change anything. If you get going bust, doesn't change anything for anybody. So you've got to be successful to make positive change, but you've got to make some really tough decisions that ultimately impact your profitability.
Talk
together.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah. Talking of it getting harder, and I'm going to touch on the pandemic briefly in a second, but also, sort of changing market, I suppose. How do you feel like you're now competing with, the likes of Deliveroo and, Uber and even, Netflix and Amazon Prime and stuff like that? What's your experience of that? I don't know, just changing habits, I suppose, of the consumer.
Yeah, we definitely are competing with all of those. At the same time, I really believe from my own personal experience of being locked down and seeing how people responded after the first lockdown is I miss my friends. I'm sure you're missing your friends, and we are all missing our friends. So Deliveroo can actually deliver you some pretty amazing food right now. People are doing a great job of takeaway and delivery. But and we can sit in front of Zoom. I'm going to a friend's Zoom birthday party this weekend, and I'm really looking forward to seeing a bunch of my buddies. But I'm looking forward to it about half as much as I would be if we were in the room together. And so all of these different bits of competition, at the end of the day, don't replace us sitting around the table. And I don't exactly know why. Maybe it's because so much of our communication is non-verbal. Maybe it's because if we're on a Zoom call, you can't reach across the table and top up your friend's glass of wine. Maybe it's because you have all these sort of slightly subliminal side conversations around a table where you're talking to one person but you're communicating with others. And I don't really know quite what it is, but I think what this has proven, and no matter what types of competition come, that pubs, great pubs, great restaurants, great cafes, great hotels will survive and thrive because we're human and we like hanging out with each other in a space. So yeah, tough, lots of competition, lots of new competition that didn't exist. Certainly when we started Peach, but I'm actually pretty positive about the future.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I think we all are, and I think you're right. I think it is that, once it's taken away, you realise just how much you appreciate, and where we might have been nervous about, the changing, like we say, the cultural differences, I suppose. Now it's been taken away. Yeah, I don't really speak to anybody who's not looking forward to getting down to the pub or getting out to a restaurant. And I do think, given permission to trade, trade will be strong. Speaking of which, you paint a picture. How bad is it? You've got a lot of contacts in the industry. You've been in the industry a long time. I'm not sure people always appreciate what's going on. What's your experience of the pandemic in hospitality? hospitality? How much is it hurting, and who's going to come out the other side? Is it the big chains that can go and raise funds from shareholders, or is it the more nimble independents? And how many people won't open? What can you tell us? Your thoughts on the pandemic?
I think we won't truly tell what won't reopen until furlough gets wound down, and that's when we're going to see the true cost of this thing, and it's going to be pretty sad, and there's going to be people losing their businesses who really don't deserve to. So I'm not looking forward to that. Yes, some of the bigger groups who can raise a lot of money are gearing up to sort of take advantage and grow fast, but there will also be I believe lots of wonderful startups popping up. People, maybe like me. If I'd been working in a restaurant, as that sort of guy in his 20s. Now, surely you'd see this as the opportunity moment to get out and do that thing you'd always dreamed of, because suddenly the rules will have changed and there will be lots of places up for to lease or buy or whatever and get started. So I don't think it's going to be one size fits all. I hope the banks will back people, not just not just the big boys, because I'd like to see a variety of new things to try, and it be a really sort of refreshing time in the industry. I've given up making too many predictions because over the past year we've had several good laughs at our board about how many predictions have not proven to be accurate at all, because it's very, very difficult to second guess exactly what's going to happen. But it's going to be a shake-up, isn't it? Like we've never seen before, and I hope that lots of good will come out of it, as well as lots of sadness.
Mm. Yeah, no, I share that. Talking about predictions, actually, and I've been in some farcical meetings. Well, certainly in the early days, we gave up pretty early on as well, making plans. But had you invested in a lot of outdoor space and marquees and stuff like that, ready to reopen for Christmas, knowing that people needed to sit outside? Because certainly a lot of the industry seemed to invest in so much stuff and then get maybe 10 days trade and be shut down again. Were you savvy enough to throw in the towel early on, or had you also invested in outside space?
Oh no. We're optimists. So we'd gone big. We'd gone big. So we've got all these beautiful stretch structures all outside. Outside covered areas with lighting and heating and blankets and made them all really beautiful. And they're all just sitting. Aging and empty, ready to be used again in hopefully not.
It's lovely that you're laughing about that, Lee. Well done. I think it's the sign of the sector where we could be quite so beaten and just you just have to laugh it off, don't you? And think, my God, I could have saved an absolute fortune, but what more can you do?
Yeah.
Okay. If you were sat then thinking about, how we come out the other side, I suppose, of this and the opportunities, if you get the opportunity to sit down and have a cup of coffee or a beer with Boris and Rishi, what would you say to them?
Oh God, good question. This isn't, this isn't the end of the line for supporting our industry. We employ a hell of a lot of people. Our places are the lifeblood of a lot of communities. You've created a tax regime that really is pretty brutal on our sector. All businesses need to change to more sustainable practice, and that isn't for free. And you've got to accept that there's a cost to doing that. And however you engineer it, one of my favourite people who I think is making a real great change at the minute is Yvonne Chouinard with his, from Patagonia with 1% for the planet. which is a great model of, imposing a self-taxation of 1% of turnover that you then invest in improving the environment. And the government needs to look at those type of models and say, we need to create that nationally. Okay, VAT for our sector should be whatever number works, but not 20. But 1% of whatever that number is into a fund that helps hospitality operate in a more sustainable way. And I don't exactly know how that would work, but Rishi is the big brain in there. I'm sure he could come up with a way that could work. And I think it's really important right now.
I was going to give you a lot longer with Boris and Rishi than that, Lee, but well done. I'm going to need half a day, to be honest, to feed up. But talking of time, alas, and we'll have to do this again because there's all sorts of stuff around sort of the team. You've got great reputation for how you look after people, sustainability and ethics, your 10 promises. There's all sorts of stuff, but it would require another hour, and we're nearly out of time. So I just want to sort of finish on the future, I suppose, and Peach's more than yours because we started with yours at the beginning. At one point, right in the early days, you said you wanted a great peach gastro pub in every market town in England. Has that ambition changed? And what's the trajectory, I suppose? How do you see the next few years panning out?
Well, every market town is a big ambition, but we could certainly do a lot more, and we're better prepared for growth than ever. I still believe it would be amazing if you could confidently find a great gastropub every time you visited a new town, in the same way that you can find other food and drink outlets. Quality pubs are one of the key elements that make somewhere a really attractive place to live. So every market town is a big goal, but I think Peach and some of the other operators out there are making great inroads into making that happen.
Prediction, when do you think you'll be reopening?
I'm an optimist. I'm going to say we'll get the doors back open in March. I love that. I would love that.
I love it.
But it needs to, when we do open, opening but with both arms tied behind your back is absolutely no good to any of us, and will just cause a death by 1,000 cuts. So that's no way. So we've got to make sure that we're in control of this thing, and that actually we can open where because people are going to just saying you can only go out with people from your own household is no opening at all. You've got to be able to mix. We are a place where people want to mix, so we've got to open with enough freedom that we can operate profitably. Otherwise, they're just going to create carnage in the industry.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a shock, wasn't it? Just how bad Christmas trade was with most of the country. I mean, obviously, different pockets, but certainly our pocket, I know about yours, was, tier 2 and Christmas trade. And you think, my goodness, if I can't operate in December, with this rule that you can only go out with your household, then the rest of the year, it's just going to be impossible. So I think you're right. I think we're speaking with a unified voice to say that, if they take away the support and say, right, you're on your own, but you can only serve people in your house, that's not going to work, and it'll be a death sentence. We are unfortunately out of time, Lee, although I hope you're right and it is March, and certainly next time we do this, let's meet for a beer sat in the sunshine somewhere, and perhaps have the other half of the questions that I've got in place. But for people who want to follow you or your journey and Peach journey, are you particularly active yourself on any particular social media, and where's the best place to go for Peach Pubs?
Well, no, Peach Pubs is definitely the Making Life Peachy website. There's a great page on there with our 10 promises, as well, of all the things that we're trying to do to be the best gastropub company on the planet. You can also find all the pubs there. I haven't been particularly active on social recently. I've sort of taken a bit of a step back, but I'm sure that won't last forever.
If there was one that lured you back in, which one was it likely to be?
Well, which platform?
Yeah. Were you ever active on any of them?
I'm more visual than words. So Instagram's more me than Twitter.
Real thing.
Mm.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I will put links up in the show notes to this episode on the website where people can find all of the various places to find you and Peach that I can find. But for now, thank you so much, Lee, for sparing the time. Congratulations on your journey, and I'll be excited to see what happens next. And hopefully our paths will pass in person soon. But thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I look forward to that. Thanks for your time.
Congratulations, you've made it to the end of the show. Quite a long one, but as you heard, I still have heaps of topics and questions to ask Lee. If you enjoyed the conversation and think I should get Lee back on again to talk about all the stuff that we ran out of time for, please do head over to the website humansofhospitality.co.uk and fill in the feedback form to let me know. Or anything else you're thinking of, topics, guest ideas, general feedback, things you'd like to hear more about, or perhaps less about, ideal length of show, whatever's on your mind, tell me, and if I can help, then I will. And whilst you're on the website, do sign up for the weekly newsletter. I'll only send you one email, once a week, on a Monday, with a link to that week's show and any useful website links or perhaps social media links that have come up during the conversation. And if you are feeling generous, the website is the perfect place to buy me a thank you beer for doing the show. You can make a one-off PayPal payment or regularly support the show through Patreon. That really helps me out in justifying the time and the cash in keeping these chats going. Right, I'll be back next Monday morning with a brand new show for you, but for now, have a great week. Cheers.